One phrase people use that rather frustrates me is, "I'll leave when things get bad enough." I think if you look back at a lot of Western countries over the last 10 or 20 years, things have progressively gotten worse. The decline has intensified. The culture of hatred of wealth has gotten a lot worse. And yet everyone thinks that they know exactly the right moment to leave. Now, I'm all for having a plan B. If you want to stay in your home country, you can be prepared. But I'm going to share with you one tax today that they may not let you avoid, even if you do leave in time. Hi, I'm Andrew Henderson, and here at Nomad Capitalist, my team of over 30 people, our network of global experts, and yours truly help 7- and 8-figure entrepreneurs and investors legally go where they're treated best. You can learn more at nomadcapitalist.com. I found an article today that I had to share with you. This is about the UK in particular, but I think it could apply anywhere. And it's from a magazine, I suppose, called the Investors Chronicle. This is the position of the Western world today, where magazines called the Investors Chronicle that are allegedly speaking to investors are putting out articles like this. Here's the headline: "A wealth tax isn't perfect, but it's better than alternatives." So, as you know, if you've been watching our channel, we've been talking about this idea of a wealth tax. My team is seeing more headlines about wealth taxes in the UK, in Canada, in countries all over the world. Lots of countries are thinking of pulling out wealth taxes, even though it failed in pretty much every European country it was tried in, and most European countries gave up on the practice. Now, new countries want to get in on the game, and the Investors Chronicle says, you know what, let's throw in the towel. Now, I'm going to read you the article, and it's going to talk about the wealth tax, but it's going to come, and I'll tell you this point when we get to the part where they tell you how you will not be able to escape. This is why I think you should get your Nomad Capitalist plan ready now. The article goes, it's by Arun Advani. With a third national lockdown now in place, the budget in March, speaking of March 2021, is unlikely to make any hard decisions. Even before the pandemic, experts were warning that the government would need to raise taxes or cut spending to meet its legislated fiscal mandate. Having rejected a return to austerity at the last election, and after promising not to raise any of the big three, the income tax, national insurance, and the VAT, this was always going to be tricky. So you will see governments that are going to use the pandemic as an excuse to go out and do what they always wanted to do, which is to raise taxes. So they already had problems. No surprise to any of us here. They already had financial problems. But as the article continues, the pandemic only sharpened these concerns. The past 9 months, this article was written in, I believe, January of 2021, have involved the provision of vital support and not a little waste, piling up an additional 400 billion pounds of borrowing. Despite this, many have lost their jobs, companies have closed as the extended economic deep freeze takes its toll. With this in mind, the Wealth Tax Commission, of which this article author was a commissioner, reported last month on how the government could square the circle. We proposed a one-off wealth tax to be brought in only when the government determined it needed... I'm sorry. Only when the government determined it needed the revenue. You know, I always think it's time for some revenue, so just bring me the revenue right now. Let's not wait. That would postpone the need for economically damaging rises in income tax or national insurance rates. Because, of course, the goal is, if you're a successful entrepreneur, if you're a successful investor, if you have not been thrown out into the street like a bum during this pandemic, you are now the enemy. So we don't want to raise anyone else's taxes, only if you have, it's like we've always said, you make $50,000 a year, your neighbor makes 60, he's rich. And so he's the guy to hate, right? And so now, when everyone is having so many problems, and I always say, I don't enjoy watching people suffering. I think it's a disaster what these people have been through, and I feel very badly for many of the shopkeepers and the restaurateurs and all that. They should have been treated better. But the answer is not to go out and say anyone who has a few shekels left now has to be taxed. But when the government decides they need the money, they will do it. Now, the article continues. The tax would cover all types of wealth: pensions, houses, taking off any mortgage debt, This makes it fair. We don't want to penalize the woman who is saved in her business relative to the one who works for the civil service, nor the man saving to buy a house relative to the one who has just bought. Although it would be assessed at a single point in time, the fallacy of a one-time tax, those are always really successful, people would have 5 years to pay the tax. We saw this in the U.S. A couple of years ago where they put in a big tax and then said, oh, don't worry, we'll give you time to pay it, as if that makes it any better. Tax due on pensions would be deferred until retirement, so you can retire broke. In cases where there is still hardship, longer periods of payment would be available to ensure no one would be required to sell their home or businesses to pay the tax. Now here's my favorite part, and here's where every aspiring nomad capitalist needs to pay attention. Here's a guy, he's writing in the Investors Chronicle. This is not the Communist Monthly. This is not, some kind of rag being passed around in, some beatnik poet society. This is the Investors Chronicle, and so the article continues. The wealth tax, which is apparently better than everything else. Don't cut spending, don't, be more prepared, don't tell the government to fix it. No, none of that. Wealth tax, we've evaluated that is the best way to take your money and to fund the government whenever they feel it's needed. It would also, quote, it would also be very hard to avoid. Our proposed design means that even immigration or moving money offshore can't be used to reduce tax bills. The use of a backwards tail ensures recent leavers will still pay. Once again, an example of what I've been telling you for the last year. I told Robert Kiyosaki, I told Fox Business. You're going to see more retroactive taxes. One of the things I said, and I talked about why I feel the best about leaving the U.S., not only physically leaving, but having eventually given up my citizenship. I feel a tremendous amount of peace in my life because I look at all these things that governments are doing. Broke governments. We knew this was only a matter of time. I was talking about this in my family when I was a teenager. We knew eventually the piper would need to be paid, and now the governments, who are broker than ever, are coming and the bill is coming due, and they are going to use the political capital they have to come against people who have been entrepreneurs, been investors, made money, been successful. Because now it's not like, oh, we respect these people, they create jobs. Now they're the devil. And so you're not going to have the peace of mind if you're living in the UK if this kind of proposal continues, which is that you can't leave when things get bad enough, because by the time they put this in place, they're going to have a provision to say, even if you leave now, he's still got you. You've got to leave before they put this in place. And the fact that they're talking about this, the fact that I've seen more articles coming out of the UK about wealth tax than anywhere else in the world. There are a number of countries considering it, and a couple countries that I've promoted, like Malaysia, that said they're not considering it. But the UK has been one of the biggest ones where the wealth tax is really dominating the headlines. Lots of people are advocating for it. And of course, they're advocating for a kinder, gentler wealth tax. You won't have to sell your home. But for people who are doing well, you're still going to pay a lot of money. And by the time they announce it, you won't be able to leave. For me, the peace of mind is knowing that whatever cockamamie ideas the U.S. government comes up with, I don't have to worry about it. And what have we seen during this pandemic? We've seen that some countries have locked their citizens in, forbidden their citizens to travel out of the country. We've seen in the U.S., if you want to renounce your citizenship, the State Department says you can't do so. Embassies are closed. And every time an embassy pops up and says, we'll do it, pretty soon they're not doing it anymore. And so there may come a time when you physically can't leave. I'm not saying that as a conspiracy theorist who thinks they're going to literally, lock you behind a wall, although certainly there are people who are locked in their homes right now and they really can't go outside. But you need to make these moves before it's too late, because you see two things happening. You see a pandemic where governments have imposed a lot of restrictions on who can travel, who can leave, who can get what government services, such as immigration. You see that it's more difficult to open up things like offshore bank accounts that makes a financial immigration possible. If you can't move your money out of the country, you may not be able to claim, I'm not living here for tax purposes anymore. And so the other issue is Because of all of this, because of all the chaos in the world right now, the governments have spent a lot of money that they didn't have, something that they're very good at, and now they want to come after you for the bill. And they need a way to make sure that nobody can leave, even if they can't lock you in physically, because I don't think they're going to lock you in your hobbit home for the rest of your life. But once they no longer can do that, they'll just say, well, the date we're using is the date when you were in your home. And, even if you leave now, too late, you still owe the tax. This is why I think everyone who's successful should have a plan B. Have a second residence, have a second home potentially, have a second citizenship, have a way to escape whatever madness comes down the pike. It doesn't have to be just taxes. Could be reduction of freedoms, could be anything. But I do think that making your plan B into a plan A sooner than later will give you the peace of mind to know that when this kind of tax, where they go back in time and say arbitrarily, this is the date that you would have had to leave by to not pay whatever we dreamed up because we just needed the money. We made it the cookie jar and now we need the money. If you're already gone, then you're one step ahead of everybody else. I think that plan B, again, is fantastic. Look to make it your plan A sooner if your goal is preserving your capital, because countries, especially in the West, the ones with high, government debt, the ones with big deficits, the ones where the political will is to go after the rich, they are going to come after you sooner or later, and they're going to use tricks like this that will be hard to avoid if you haven't planned in advance. How can Nomad Capitalist help you? 4 ways. Number 1, subscribe to our channel and click the notification bell to make sure you get our new video every day. Number 2, get a copy of Nomad Capitalist, the book. You'll learn a lot of my personal experiences over a dozen years of studying this stuff, as well as exactly some of the strategies that you can use to build your Nomad Capitalist plan. Number 3, if you're not sure where to start, but you want to come and learn from my team and I, you want to come and mingle with like-minded people, learn more about our live conference, Nomad Capitalist Live. It's coming up soon. And number 4, if you want some help right now because you've got a burning issue, you need something solved, you want to lower your taxes, get a second passport, or build the Nomad Capitalist lifestyle of your dreams, go to nomadcapitalist.com and click on Become a Client.